born in East Liverpool, Ohio, which is famous for being the home of, if you're a baseball fan, Bernie Allen and Lou Holtz. We used to come to Chautauqua in the summer, and we built a house up there in 1958. So that's how I got to know the area. So I used to be up here every summer, and then we moved here in '68 for good. And then I got married, and I moved to town here for good in '74. So I've been here longer than I was in Ohio. I started at the Journal '75. Took over for Frank Hyde when he retired in December of '79 as the sports editor, and I've been in that spot ever since.
Through the chronology of his coverage of the Jamestown baseball franchises, here's a couple of looks of how he looked during those early days.
I vaguely remember Razor Shines because I think he got the nickname from Pat Doherty. I think Pat, he named him. You know, Bob? I think he did.
I think he did.
And I mean, it's stuck with him ever since. First real Expo I covered, who I remember to make it to the majors, was Wighouse, the catcher. What's his first name? Tom? Yeah. Then there was Jack O'Connor, the pitcher. He made it with the Twins. And there seemed to be a long lull, and then there was a whole batch. One of the early ones was Wallace Johnson, who made it as a utility infielder with Montreal. An interesting story about Johnson, which I did a column on, was he played with Larry Bird on the baseball team at Indiana State, because Johnson was drafted, and he came here the year after Indiana State was in the finals and everything. And I'd recalled that Bird had joined the baseball team, put joined in quotes. What they did is they had him on the team to help draw some fans to the games, so it was nice of him to do it. So that I asked Johnson what it was like to have Bird on the team, which he really didn't do too much other than wear a uniform and everything. Trying to think, after Johnson, some other ones that made it. Pat Rooney was up. Yeah, it seemed to be guys who went up the first years when I was with the team weren't anybody who became a starter or a name that anybody knew, and then all of a sudden we got hit with the Delino DeShields and the Marquise Grissams, and then it seemed to steamroll. Grissom played here. I can't remember the year now, but after the season he played here, he was in the major leagues the next August because he got called up. And it was '88. I remember watching him play against the Cubs. So he made the jump in a year, or less than a year. Another one who made the jump that quick was the pitcher Chris Haney, who's still with the Royals. He was with the Expos, and then he went over to the Royals. Speaking of Haney, Haney was sort of a classy guy just because his dad had pitched in the majors, and he was a coach in the majors, and he knew he'd make it, but he wasn't a cocky guy. I remember I did a story with him one time, and I asked him what his goal was the next year to go to Double-A or to High A, and he wanted to go to Double-A, and that he explained too that it's better to be in Double-A than it is in Triple-A, because that you get seen a lot more in Double-A, which you'll notice now. A lot of players will jump from Double-A to the majors. But you get into Triple-A, you've got players on the way up, you've got players on the way down, and you've got the Razor Shines who have been there for who knows how many years. So anyways, Haney's goal was to get to Double-A, which he did that next year, and then he ended up in the majors. The year after that, I'll leave the name out, we had a pitcher here who pitched in the the College World Series for LSU, and he was here a week after that. So I decided to do a story with him about what it's like to be there, and suddenly he's in the low minors and all this. And I brought up to him about his goal for the next year, whether he'd like to be, to make it all the way to AA, which he informed me he thought that he should be in AA right now. As I recall, he never got above A ball. As we got into July, I'd written a column about him, which that I was sort of ashamed to have used all that space on this fella, because I found out the team couldn't stand him. He thought that he was God's gift to pitching, and now he's probably in a grocery store bagging. So
he ended up breaking his hand, didn't he?
Yes, I think in a fight or something.
Well, he hit a locker.
Oh, he punched a locker, and the locker won. So. Delino DeShields, when he made it, Bob recalls real well, because it's the only time I gave a player 3 errors in 1 inning, and he had a 4th, and I just couldn't give the guy a 4th error, but he was a terrible fielder, which he pretty much still is, and I think he'd admit it, but he made it on his speed and everything else. But anymore, when I see a player with the Jammers or the Expos, and they're having a rough year for fielding, because we had a guy this year, I think he had 3 errors in a game. It wasn't an inning, and I was going to tell him, well, the last guy who did that, his name's Delino DeShields, and he's in the majors, so anything can happen. And I remember Randy, when I was hanging around by the dugout one day, I had my cameras. And if you know now that he's a big photography buff, his stuff has been published. And I remember he's asking about my cameras, and I had a Canon, and whether I liked Canon and all that. And I just remember him as this big, tall guy who never got to pitch, and little did I know, we know who he is now. I went to the Pirates opener, I don't know how many years ago, and that's when the Expos had DeShields, Grissom, Galarraga. Before the game, I interviewed them all, and they were all real cooperative. And I knew who was on the team was Galarraga too, and he was cooperative as any of them. But Grissom, he was really, oh yeah, Jamestown, yeah, and everything. And then he said, yeah, I remember the announcer there. Well, I'd gone down with Todd Peterson. And Todd was sitting up in the stands, and he goes, yeah, he had red hair. I said, yeah, he's sitting over there. And he looked up, yeah, that's him. Hi, how you doing, and everything. So yeah, when you ask about Jamestown, they always remember it. I remember a couple of years ago when the Bisons played the Pirates up in Buffalo, when they were Pirates Farm Club. So that I decided I'd ask Leland about playing in Jamestown, and I thought it might be, he'd sort of go, oh, Jamestown, well, boy, he started to rattle off Bemis Point, and he used to go to Bemis, and he remembered this and all these towns, and so that he remembered everything. Phil Regan was the same too. I interviewed him at an Orioles game when he was the manager, and luckily I got him then, because then he got fired at the end of the year. But same thing, Jamestown. Well, you've seen Greg's tapes.
Yeah.
He remembers the bus driver and buying the Cool Pops or whatever. So, in the lake. So.
Jerry Klein's song.
Yes, Jerry Klein. He always brought up Jerry Klein. I don't know if that's what you wanted, but that's what you got.
We enjoyed it.